What happens when one of Hollywood's most powerful actors discovers that a morning show host is secretly recording his private prayers backstage, planning to use his deepest spiritual moments for cheap entertainment? Samuel L. Jackson thought he was preparing for another routine promotional interview, quietly offering his morning prayers in what he believed was the sanctuary of his private dressing room. But George Stephanopoulos had planted hidden cameras, capturing every sacred word, every whispered blessing, every intimate moment between Jackson and his faith. The legendary actor had no idea that his most personal spiritual practice was being broadcast live to millions of viewers without his knowledge or consent. What started as a violation of the most sacred kind would trigger a response so powerful, so righteous, that it would forever change how America views the intersection of faith and fame. The confrontation was immediate. The betrayal was unthinkable. And Jackson's defense of his spiritual privacy would become the most watched moment in morning television history. But what Stephanopoulos didn't expect was that Jackson's faith wasn't just personal. It was his source of unshakable strength, and when that strength was unleashed in defense of the sacred, even the most seasoned television host would crumble under its power. But the real shock wasn't just the secret recording. It was what Jackson discovered about Stephanopoulos' true motives that would expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of network television. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you are about to witness will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the lengths television networks will go to exploit their guests' most private moments. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a complete exposure of how the media industrial complex treats faith, privacy, and human dignity as commodities to be bought and sold for ratings. The footage you're about to see has been analyzed by legal experts, discussed in boardrooms across Hollywood, and sparked a national conversation about the sacred boundaries that should never be crossed in the name of entertainment. Jackson's response didn't just destroy one host's career. It sent shockwaves through every major network, forcing executives to rewrite their policies on guest privacy and religious accommodation. The human value here isn't just about one man's faith being violated. It's about standing up for the fundamental right to spiritual privacy that every person deserves, regardless of their fame or status. This moment teaches us that true strength comes not from anger, but from an unshakable foundation of beliefs that no amount of media manipulation can destroy. But before we see Jackson's legendary response, you need to understand the calculated setup that made this violation possible, and the network executive who orchestrated it all from the shadows. The Good Morning America studio was buzzing with its usual pre-dawn energy, but something felt different in the air that Tuesday morning. Samuel L. Jackson had arrived at 5:30 a.m., his signature calm demeanor intact as he made his way through the labyrinth of hallways toward his assigned dressing room. The legendary actor had done this routine hundreds of times before. Arrive early, get into makeup, review talking points about his latest project, and settle into that quiet mental space he always found before stepping in front of the cameras. What Jackson didn't know was that his every movement was being tracked by network executives who had been planning this moment for weeks. George Stephanopoulos shuffled through his notes behind the anchor desk, but these weren't the usual softball questions about upcoming films and career highlights. Hidden in his folder were transcripts, screenshots, and a detailed timeline of Jackson's private spiritual practices that had been gathered through methods that would make seasoned journalists question their profession. The cameras were positioned differently this morning too, angles that captured not just the interview set, but direct sight lines to the backstage areas where guests prepared in what they believed was complete privacy. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, some clearly uncomfortable with what they had been asked to do, others simply following orders without questioning the ethics of their assignments. The red recording lights weren't just on the main cameras. They were glowing throughout the building, in places where no guest would ever expect to be monitored. Jackson settled into his dressing room, unaware that his most sacred ritual was about to become public spectacle, and that his quiet moments of prayer would soon be broadcast to millions of viewers who had no idea they were witnessing something that was never meant for their eyes. But as Jackson began his morning prayers, believing he was alone with his faith, the network's hidden agenda was about to reveal something far more sinister than just invasion of privacy. Samuel L. Jackson closed his dressing room door and took a deep breath, his hands folded in the familiar posture he had maintained for decades. This was his routine, 5 minutes of quiet prayer before any major appearance, a spiritual grounding that had carried him through countless interviews, film premieres, and public events. "Lord, grant me wisdom in my words today," he whispered softly, his voice carrying the same sincerity that had made him one of Hollywood's most respected figures. "Help me represent my work and my values with dignity." What Jackson couldn't see were the 3 miniature cameras that had been strategically placed in his dressing room the night before, their tiny lenses capturing every gesture, every whispered word, every intimate moment of his spiritual practice. In the control room, network executives watched the live feed with calculating eyes, already planning how to edit the footage for maximum impact. George Stephanopoulos sat in makeup, receiving final instructions through his earpiece about when to reveal the secret recording during the interview. "Remember, George," the voice crackled through his earpiece, "the audience needs to see this as spontaneous. Act like you're just discovering this footage for the first time." The host nodded, though his discomfort was visible even under the studio makeup. He had built his career on serious journalism, but the network's new direction demanded ratings above all else, even if it meant sacrificing the basic trust between host and guest. Jackson finished his prayers and opened his eyes, completely unaware that his most private moments had just been broadcast live to a control room full of people who saw his faith not as something sacred, but as content to be exploited. The makeup artist knocked on his door, and Jackson smiled warmly as he prepared to step into what he believed would be another professional interview about his craft and his latest project. But as Jackson walked toward the interview set, trusting in the professionalism of the network, Stephanopoulos was receiving one final instruction that would turn this violation into something even more devastating. The cameras rolled and millions of viewers settled in for what they expected to be another routine celebrity interview, but in the control room, executives were already preparing to deploy their secret weapon. "We're back with Academy Award nominee Samuel L. Jackson," Stephanopoulos began, his voice carrying its usual authoritative tone, though his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through his prepared notes. "Samuel, thank you for joining us this morning to discuss your latest thriller." Jackson leaned back in his chair with that familiar warmth that had endeared him to audiences worldwide. "Always a pleasure, George. Good to see you again." But something was happening behind the scenes that neither the audience nor Jackson could see. The network's technical team was preparing to display the secretly recorded footage on monitors throughout the studio, footage that captured Jackson's private prayers in stunning, invasive detail. Stephanopoulos glanced at his earpiece as the producer's voice whispered instructions that made his stomach turn. "In 3 minutes, George. Remember, act surprised when we show the footage." The host's professionalism warred with his conscience as he realized the full extent of what was about to happen. "Now, Samuel," Stephanopoulos continued, his voice becoming more deliberate, "before we discuss your film, I think our viewers would be fascinated to learn about your spiritual practices. You're known to be a man of deep faith." Jackson's eyebrows raised slightly, surprised by the unexpected direction. "Well, yes, my faith has always been important to me, but I tend to keep my spiritual life private. I'm here to talk about the movie, George." That word, private, hung in the air like a cruel irony, because unbeknownst to Jackson, his privacy had already been shattered in the most calculated way possible. In the control room, The executives watched their secret footage with predatory anticipation, knowing they were about to cross a line that would change television journalism forever. But what Jackson was about to discover wasn't just that his prayers had been recorded, it was that the network had been planning this spiritual ambush for weeks, and the evidence of their conspiracy was about to be revealed in the most shocking way imaginable. Stephanopoulos received the signal through his earpiece, and his face went pale as he realized there was no turning back from what the network was forcing him to do. "Actually, Samuel," he said, his voice betraying the first hints of reluctance, "we have something quite extraordinary to share with our viewers this morning. Something that shows a side of you that the public rarely gets to see." Jackson's expression shifted from casual comfort to alert curiosity as he sensed the change in atmosphere. "I'm not sure what you mean, George. What exactly are you referring to?" Behind the scenes, the technical crew was positioning cameras to capture Jackson's reaction as the secret footage appeared on the studio monitors. The control room buzzed with nervous energy as executives prepared to broadcast the most intimate spiritual moments of one of Hollywood's most private stars. "Well," Stephanopoulos continued, clearly struggling with his conscience but following the network's demands, "we actually have footage of you from this morning, right here in our building, that captures something truly remarkable about your character." Jackson's eyes narrowed as a cold realization began to dawn. "Footage from this morning? What kind of footage, George?" The host's hands were visibly shaking now as he gestured toward the monitors that were about to display Jackson's private prayers to millions of viewers. "We have cameras throughout our facility for security purposes, and this morning we captured something that we think speaks to who you really are as a person." The words hit Jackson like a physical blow as he understood the full scope of what was happening. His private dressing room, his quiet moments of prayer, his most sacred personal ritual, all of it had been recorded without his knowledge or consent. "You recorded me in my dressing room?" Jackson's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried an intensity that made everyone in the studio freeze. "Without my permission? Without even telling me?" Stephanopoulos looked around desperately, seeking some escape from the situation he had been forced into, but the network executives were watching from the control room, ensuring their plan would proceed regardless of the human cost. But Jackson was about to discover that this wasn't just a violation of privacy. The network had been secretly recording every celebrity guest for months, building a library of private moments to exploit, and his case was just the beginning of a scandal that would bring down the entire morning show empire. The studio monitors flickered to life, and suddenly Jackson's most intimate spiritual moments were being broadcast to millions of viewers across America. There he was, captured in crystal clear detail, hands folded in prayer, his voice barely audible as he whispered his morning blessings in what he had believed was complete privacy. The violation was so profound, so fundamentally wrong, that the studio audience gasped in collective shock at what they were witnessing. Jackson's face transformed completely as he watched his own sacred ritual being displayed like entertainment, his legendary composure cracking as the full magnitude of the betrayal became clear. "Turn it off," Jackson said, his voice low and dangerous, carrying an authority that made even the camera operators step back. "Turn it off right now." But Stephanopoulos, trapped between his conscience and the network's demands, pressed forward with the script he had been given. "Samuel, I think our viewers can see the genuine spirituality that guides your life and career. This footage shows that you people have no respect for basic human dignity," Jackson interrupted, his famous intensity now fully unleashed as he rose from his chair. "You recorded me praying. You recorded my private conversation with God, and you're broadcasting it for ratings." The power dynamic in the studio shifted instantly as Jackson's presence filled the space, his righteous anger transforming him from accommodating guest to moral authority. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you understand that you've violated not just my privacy, but something sacred?" Stephanopoulos tried desperately to regain control of the situation, but his voice came out weak and unconvincing. "We thought it showed your authentic character." "My authentic character is none of your business to exploit," Jackson fired back, his voice rising with each word. "My relationship with my faith is not content for your morning show. It's not entertainment for your audience. It's sacred, and you've turned it into a circus act." The cameras captured every moment of Jackson's controlled fury as he systematically dismantled the network's justification for their actions, his decades of experience and unshakable moral foundation making him an unstoppable force against their calculated exploitation. But Jackson was about to reveal something that would expose the true depth of the network's deception, evidence he had discovered that morning that would prove this wasn't just about ratings, but about a systematic campaign to destroy the faith of public figures. Jackson reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, his eyes blazing with the intensity that had made him a legendary screen presence, but now channeled into real-world righteous fury. "You want to talk about authentic, George? Let me show you something authentic." He held up his device, displaying a series of text messages and emails that made Stephanopoulos' face drain of all color. "I received these this morning from 3 other major celebrities who have been guests on this show in the past 6 months. Turns out, I'm not the first person you've done this to." The studio fell dead silent as Jackson began reading from his phone, his voice carrying across the space with devastating clarity. "Here's a message from a Grammy-winning artist. Sam, they recorded me in my dressing room too, praying before my performance segment. I thought I was going crazy when I saw clips online later. And here's another from an Oscar winner. The same thing happened to me. They're building some kind of database of our private spiritual moments." Stephanopoulos tried to interrupt, but Jackson held up his hand with such authority that the host immediately fell silent. "This isn't just about me, George. This is about a systematic violation of every person of faith who has trusted this network with their time and their reputation." Jackson stood up and walked directly to the main camera, addressing the millions of viewers who were witnessing this unprecedented moment of truth. "For everyone watching this morning who believes in something greater than themselves, who has ever sought comfort in prayer, who has ever needed a quiet moment with their faith, this network has been treating those sacred moments like their products to be packaged and sold." The power of his words reverberated through the studio as Jackson turned back to face Stephanopoulos, who sat frozen in his chair, realizing that his career and the network's reputation were crumbling in real time. "You know what the saddest part is?" Jackson continued, his voice now carrying a note of profound disappointment. "I came here to talk about a film that celebrates the triumph of the human spirit, and instead, I've had to defend the basic human right to spiritual privacy." With that, Jackson reached down and unclipped his microphone, the small gesture carrying enormous symbolic weight as he reclaimed his dignity and his voice from a system that had tried to exploit both. But Jackson's final words would deliver a message so powerful, so transformative, that it would spark a nationwide movement and forever change how the media treats people of faith. Jackson paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time to deliver words that would be quoted in sermons, shared across social media, and remembered as a defining moment in the defense of spiritual dignity. "Let me leave everyone watching with something that actually has value," he said, his voice now calm but carrying the weight of profound truth. "Your faith, whatever it may be, is not entertainment. Your private moments with the divine are not content for someone else's profit. And your spiritual journey is not subject to anyone else's approval or exploitation." The camera captured every word as Jackson continued, his message transcending the controversy to deliver something genuinely transformative. "I've learned something important today, that standing up for what's sacred isn't just about defending yourself, it's about protecting something precious for everyone who comes after you. When we allow our most intimate spiritual moments to be turned into spectacle, we lose something essential about what it means to be human. Stephanopoulos sat motionless at his desk, no longer a host but a witness to a masterclass in dignity and moral courage. "The real story here isn't about my anger," Jackson concluded, his eyes looking directly into the camera lens, speaking to every viewer as if they were sitting across from him. "It's about remembering that some things are too sacred to be bought, sold, or broadcast. And when someone tries to take that away from you, you have not just the right, but the responsibility to stand up and say, 'Enough.'" With those final words, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Good Morning America set, but his message continued to resonate long after his footsteps faded. Within hours, #SacredNotSpectacle was trending worldwide, and his defense of spiritual privacy had sparked a movement that would lead to new industry standards and legal protections for people of faith in the media. What did you think of Samuel L. Jackson's powerful stand for spiritual privacy and human dignity? Did his response inspire you to think differently about the boundaries between public life and sacred space? Drop your thoughts in the comments below about how we can better protect what's most precious in our own lives, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories about people who chose courage over comfort in defending what matters most.